If you're not yet quite convinced by the electric vehicle revolution, then maybe BMW's i3 could be the car to do it. This model is all the things you'd expect a compact EV to be: refined, eco-conscious, and super affordable to run. But it's also surprising when it comes to sheer driving enjoyment, thanks in large part to the light weight of a specially developed, state-of-the-art carbon fibre and aluminium chassis. This improved model builds on that character with an extra, more focused i3S variant, and as before, there's the option of adding in a range extender petrol generator to alleviate driving range anxiety. It's all part of BMW's rather different approach to EV motoring.
Electric cars may still be of minority interest to buyers, but the car makers know that EVs couldn't be more significant. Hence the vast improvements made to the operating range of models in this segment in the last couple of years. Amongst compact contenders in this sector, though, there really is still only one premium choice, and this is it, the BMW i3. In early 2018, the brand brought us the significantly revised model that we're going to test here. The i3 was originally launched back in 2013 as a first offering from its maker's BMW i all-electric sub-brand, into which the Munich manufacturer has ploughed over £2 billion worth of investment. Futuristic looks were matched with even more sophistication underneath, courtesy of a groundbreaking carbon fibre and aluminium chassis. And this made the car lighter than obvious EV rivals, and it allowed for the installation of an optional range extender two-cylinder petrol engine for buyers who needed to maximise operating range. The resulting package has, in electric vehicle terms at least, been quite successful for BMW, with over 10,000 global sales. That's helped by the fact that the brand has been continually developing the car since launch, as it needed to. The rather feeble 60 amp hour, 22 kilowatt hour battery package supplied with this car when it was first launched had a real world range that struggled to reach 80 miles between charges, and that meant that almost 3/4 of customers felt forced to pay extra for the pricey range extender engine. Things improved greatly in 2016 though, when a new 94 amp hour 33 kilowatt hour battery unit increased that range by almost 50%. As a result, the i3 consolidated its position as our market's joint second best-selling all-electric model, vying with the Renault Zoe, both models just behind the Nissan Leaf. But of course, this BMW is a pricier, more upmarket feeling product than either of those two contenders. Premium credentials which were enhanced by the further round of changes which brought us this significantly improved model. It's a little smarter, it's a little better connected, and it's a little better equipped. And most significantly, there is now an additional variant, this sportier i3S, which gets more power and sharper chassis dynamics. Whatever version you prefer though, the i3 remains a car of contradictions, an individual choice yet with mass appeal, and an eco-warrior that a petrol head might enjoy. Ultimately though, it's a BMW born to be electric, which ought to be a very good thing indeed. Let's find out. So, what's it like? Will you take your place on the high-set driver's seat and survey the elevated view it offers of the road ahead? Surely ideal for urban motoring. Here is a driving environment that is very different from the kind you'll be used to. There's no gear stick, no conventional instrument cluster, and all the information that you'll need is marshalled by two freestanding screens. All the driving stuff has been crammed onto this single right-hand stalk, including the start-stop button and the auto gear selector. Power up, and a dull chime replaces the sound of a starter motor. Click into drive, and there's no creep like you'll get from a conventional auto, but brush the throttle and the i3 eases away with a gentle whir from its electric power plant. Full electric cars tend to be all about sustainability, that rosy glow that comes with being an early adopter, and Well, sometimes not a lot else. It's refreshing to find that this one is rather different. If you need confirmation that the i3 is shot through with BMW DNA, a short tripping one will provide it. This is anything but an anodyne electric box. Instead, it's almost everything you wouldn't expect. All 50-50 weight distribution, feel and feedback in a package capable of really rewarding you at the wheel. This thing has character to it, something that's evident not only through the futuristic style of the fittings, but also from the way it matches the instant throttle response that you'd expect from an all-electric vehicle with the crisp steering feedback that you don't. An EV developed and built by people who care. Now, if you're someone who likes your driving, it's enough to make you feel a whole lot better about the kinds of cars that the next couple of decades might bring us. Two versions of this BMW are these days on offer. A standard variant with an electric motor rated at 170 HP, and the top derivative that we're trying here, the sportier i3S, which uses a motor rated at 184 HP. But that increase allows for an improvement in peak pulling power from 250 to 270 Newton meters. Now that might not sound much, but in an i3S, it's enough to facilitate 6.6 second mid-range 30 to 70 miles an hour sprint time. That's about a second quicker than the ordinary car. So it's just as well that the handling of the S model has been uprated too, with a 40mm wider track, 10mm lower ride height, larger 20-inch wheels, and specially tuned springs, dampers and anti-roll bars. All of that makes this BMW feel even more planted and agile, but also predictably it stiffens up the ride quality, and that's already quite firm in the standard i3 because the engineers wanted to reduce the natural tendency of this tall, narrow body to roll around the corners. There's no kind of adaptive damping system available to minimize the downside here, so even if you're absolutely set on the i3S, we'd really advise you to try the ordinary variant before you finally decide. As ever with an i3, whatever choice you make, you'll have the option of ordering your car in either full electric spec or in the range extender or REX form that around 75% of customers choose. Now the preference here is really down to peace of mind. The REX package adds in a Korean-built 2-cylinder petrol generator which can cut in to increase your driving range should you run out of battery charge. Now note that we've called it a generator rather than an engine, and that's because it never actually drives the wheels. Originally designed for a BMW scooter, it's only 647cc in size and it develops just 37 bhp, so it probably wouldn't be up to that. Its role instead is to add around 80 miles to this model's driving range and to mask worries that owners might otherwise have about the restrictions on the distance this car can travel between charges. Now that was certainly a concern when the i3 was first launched back in 2013. The old 60 amp hour 22 kilowatt hour battery pack fitted back then was supposed to allow at least 80 miles of real world milk float mobility, but it rarely did unless you drove like Miss Marple. BMW quickly moved to try to improve things in 2016, installing a replacement 94 amp hour 33 kilowatt hour battery pack that continues on in this facelifted model and claims to increase that original range by up to 50%. Now in real terms, you'll need to know that that means an absolute maximum of around 120 miles if, as is necessary, you ignore the frankly misleading official new European driving cycle figures that your dealership may still quote you. Rivals in this segment like the Renault Zoe and the Nissan Leaf now use bigger 40 kilowatt hour batteries and can go 30 to 40% further between charges. Just as well then that the i3 has the range extender option as a unique selling point in this class, although ordering it does seem to rather fly in the face of what EV motoring is supposed to be all about. This car is certainly at its best when you're not using the petrol unit. Think of it as a get out of jail free card and try not to press it into service too often. Now you can allow the generator to automatically kick in, which it does with a muffled clatter. It's a bit like someone starting a lawnmower in the garden next door, and that happens when battery capacity drops below 20%. Or you can manage its activation yourself via the car's iDrive settings menu. Why might you do that? Well, if you're on a longer trip, once the battery range has gone down below 75%, you might want to switch the generator in earlier so that normal battery charge can be saved for city driving later on in the journey. The opposite scenario, though, is one where you're nearly home and the petrol motor is just about to cut in, yet you know from your remaining battery range that you can make it back to base. That's when you might want to stop the generator cutting in and needlessly using up fuel. Bear in mind though that if you get your range calculation wrong and you run the battery power right down to the zero charge point where the generator is then forced to cut in, you'll then be given that little scooter power plant an awful lot of work to do, because it will simultaneously have to charge the batteries while providing power to the electric motor. Something would inevitably have to give, which is why your top speed would then be limited to just 44 miles an hour. And that wouldn't be an awful lot of fun on the motorway, would it? Now, while we're on the subject, fun. As we said earlier, the whole rather unique concept of real driving enjoyment blended with more traditional EV virtues like refinement and sustainability is a big part of why you might want to buy this car. Now, we've talked about the surprising way that it tackles corners, but that might not be the abiding memory that you carry away from your test drive. Primarily, we think you'll be pleasantly surprised and perhaps even a little shocked by the speed of this thing. Now, all full electric vehicles have instant torque from rest, but that is usually quickly blunted by the heavy weight that they typically have to carry around. Now, thanks to lightweight carbon fiber construction that makes this BMW 250 to 300 kilos lighter than some of its rivals, this i3 is a little different. And as a result, you really get to experience the sheer performance that this technology can deliver. At typical city speeds, that can be quite startling. Now, we're talking here about a car that can propel itself from 0 to 37 miles an hour in just 3.7 seconds, which is quicker than a V8 engine BMW M4 Super Coupe. In fact, if you're in an i3, then nothing short of a supercar is ever going to out-drag you away from the lights. There is something vaguely childish but comical about watching a GTI driver cooking their front tyres in a bid to catch up with this eco-minded electric runabout. Who says sustainability has to be so serious? The range extender model is obviously a little heavier than the pure EV version. Its generator and fuel tank adds the weight of an extra podgy passenger, but the performance difference isn't very significant. The pure electric model is 7.3 second, 0 to 62 miles an hour showing, slows to a still respectable 8.1 seconds in the petrol assisted REX variant. For this sportier i3S, the 0 to 62 miles an hour figure of the pure electric version is 6.9 seconds, and that falls to 7.7 seconds if you go for the range extender derivative. You'll need to manage your expectations when it comes to the top speed though, and that's pegged at 93 miles an hour in the ordinary model or 99 miles an hour in the i3S. And you only get that if you're using the standard drive performance control driving mode system in its normal comfort or more efficient Eco Pro modes. If you switch into the third Eco Pro Plus setting, then your velocity is restricted to just 50 miles an hour. The i3S also has an extra sport mode for sharper throttle response and tighter steering characteristics. Don't worry if you can't stretch to this top variant though, or if you find yourself unable to deal with its rather over-firm, low-speed ride on bumpier roads. As we've been saying all the way through, even the ordinary version of this car is capable of rewarding you at the wheel. That is certainly one thing you would expect from a model with a blue and white roundel on the nose, and another is the provision of drive to the back wheels rather than those at the front, which is an unusual thing for an electric vehicle, and it's another reason why the traction away from the line is so good. Now, true, the tyres are skinny, but they do a remarkably effective job of transmitting the torque to the tarmac, although understeer, body lean and lack of side bolster support on the seats will ultimately see you throttling back on the shopping rocket heroics. You would expect that from the tall, short appearance. The limitations of that are well disguised though by the rear weight bias and the light but direct electric steering, and that's borrowed from the Mark III model Mini hatch. That makes the car feel lithe and sporty, and with just 2.5 turns lock to lock, it also endows it with quick reflexes in town. The 9.86 metre turning circle of the ordinary i3 model is comically tight, and that's matched by an amazing level of manoeuvrability in small available spaces, this BMW is simple to slot into the tightest parking spots. As is becoming common with the modern breed of full electric cars, it's possible to perform most of your journeys in this one using only one pedal. There are already only two. All EVs are automatic, of course, but in most scenarios you can leave the brake pedal well alone. How so? Well, it's certainly something that takes a bit of getting used to. Now, the moment that you lift your foot off the accelerator, the electric motor switches from drive to a recharging generator mode, and that feeds power into the lithium-ion battery. At lower speeds, this has the side effect of creating a significant braking force, and that means that if you plan ahead, you can soon carry out most of your slowing down maneuvers without actually touching the brake pedal. Don't worry about being rear-ended by following cars either. As a safety measure, the brake lights come on if the regeneration slows you significantly. It all means that switching back into a conventional vehicle after using an i3 can get quite alarming if you forget what you're driving and you expect the same kind of braking effect to kick in by merely rolling your foot off the accelerator. But then driving an EV should be a different experience. A different experience, though, isn't always an enjoyable one. This BMW shows it can be. This i3 is now the only compact electric vehicle on the market with really futuristic styling. Other brands simply install this technology into a familiar existing model, so think Volkswagen's e-Golf, or they use the bespoke body style, but they make it look as mainstream as possible, as Nissan's done with the second generation version of its Leaf. Following either of these two paths would certainly have been less risky than producing a design as willfully extravagant as this. It would have been easier and cheaper too. But in creating this car, BMW decided to create something completely unique. Why? Well, because in developing the i3, the Munich maker wanted to bring the market something different, an electric vehicle that people could really enjoy driving, the BMW of EVs. Electric models can't usually offer that because of the heavy battery pack that they have to carry around. The i3, of course, has to have one of those too. The designers couldn't do much about that. What they could do, though, was to reduce the weight of the bodywork that surrounds that battery and the chassis it sits on. But that approach was only possible in a car that was created completely from scratch. Simply stick a battery propulsion pack in a body shape that's more appropriate for a combustion engine, and compromise creeps in, with space wasted where components like the fuel tank and the exhaust system would normally be housed. Plus, in the mass market at least, conventionally engined automotive structures usually need to be fabricated using heavy steel underpinnings. So you can see why a standalone design like that of this i3 was necessary. Starting from a clean sheet of paper, the BMW eDrive development team were able to create a lightweight body perfectly balanced to suit the specific needs of its electric power pack. The created weight saving could then be invested in larger batteries to improve the operating range. That was the idea anyway. Here is the reality, with bodywork fabricated from the kind of aluminium and carbon fibre mix that you'll find on a McLaren supercar or an F1 Grand Prix racer. Those are the headlines. The reality is that most of the carbon fibre used is blended with plastic. That sounds far less exotic. Still, what's important is the end result. Without the batteries, what we have here would be easily the lightest car on the market. Even with them, this BMW still only tips the scales at just over 1.3 tonnes. That's about the same as a conventional Ford Focus. That makes it 260 kilos lighter than a Nissan Leaf and 295 kilos lighter than a Volkswagen e-Golf. That's a massive difference. No wonder an i3 feels so much more agile to drive. That's impressive, but whether it all justifies a design quite as curious as this one is a judgment potential buyers will have to make. Just about the only car that we can think of that looks anything like this in profile is Audi's old A2, another design thought of as being well before its time. The i3 is much bigger than the A2 though, measuring 4 metres in length, which means it's a few centimetres longer than the Ford Fiesta, but at nearly 1.6 metres high, quite a bit taller. Having said that though, you don't see too many Fiestas riding on 19-inch wheels like those included as part of the deal on standard i3s, unless you've got a few old copies of Max Power stashed away somewhere. And we certainly like the front end, which has introduced some subtle new vocabulary to BMW's well-established design language. The Munich maker's familiar double kidney grille is present and correct, but it's purely cosmetic because the electrically powered i3 doesn't require any cooling air, even if you choose one with a supplementary range extender petrol engine fitted out back. Positioned at the same height are these sleek, characterful headlights, and they feature standard full LED beams on this revised model, and the lamps sweep back well into the flanks, and they're framed by U-shaped LED running light units. The front bumper's been restyled in this improved model, and it features this black U-shaped surround that flows up into these horizontal turn signal indicators. Move around the car and the aesthetics get a little more controversial, particularly here at the rear with this starkly styled vertical tailgate, the hatch that's bejeweled with floating LED light units. The addition of this mid-level chromed strip is intended to add a bit of extra visual width. In profile, you'll look in vain for much that visually connects this extravagant design with anything else you'll find in one of the Munich maker's showrooms. This sportier variant is 10mm lower to the ground, and it rides on larger 20-inch rims. As before, the i3's major signature feature is what BMW calls a black belt. This is made up of darkly coloured panels for the bonnet and the roof. With this lightly facelifted design, the brands link these two areas with black finished A-pillars and side roof lines, giving the bodywork a fashionable two-tone look. A more controversial touch is a sudden dip in the pronounced so-called streamflow shoulder line just rearwards of the front doors. Now, this has apparently been incorporated so as to create a larger side window surface for the rear passenger compartment, but at first glance it does look like a bit of an afterthought. You'll be glad it's there though if you have to take a seat in the back, because otherwise this whole rear seat area would be a bit of a black hole and pretty impossible to get into were it not for these opposing coach-style doors that open to reveal the lack of the kind of central B-pillar that almost every other car in the world has to have. Now, backseat occupants would be pretty much trapped if this BMW had one, but the bodywork and chassis of an i3 are so stiff that a centre pillar is not necessary. So it is that, rather against the odds, what we have here is a car that's incredibly easy for anyone of any age to get in and out of. It is unfortunate though that the rear doors can't be opened until the front one has been, which means that you'll always have to act like a chauffeur when you're dropping the kids off on the school run. Talk of children brings up a potentially deal-breaking point for family folk, namely that only 2 people can actually be accommodated back here, even though 3 probably would fit at a squash thanks to the lack of the usual centre transmission tunnel. Children probably won't like the fixed side windows either. On a more positive note though, those passengers that you can take will enjoy reasonable rear legroom. That's thanks to the thin front seats, and plenty of headroom thanks to the way that this ceiling has been indented. Although because there is a battery pack underneath the floor, your feet and knees are situated a bit higher up than would otherwise be the case. There are ISOFIX mounting points, but you'll probably have to push forward the front seats a bit to get a child seat in. Storage back here is at a bit of a premium. You get twin cup holders between the seats, but there are no door bins or seat back pockets, just a little cubby by the door pull. There's no 12-volt socket or centre armrest either, and the thick pillars can make things feel a bit claustrophobic. On the plus side, this is certainly a flexible space. The completely flat floor makes it possible to easily shimmy across the car and exit on either side. There's a totally flat floor up front too, and the roomy feeling you get is enhanced by the low window line and the tall, airy cabin. There's no conventional instrument cluster, just 2 high-definition LCD screens, one behind the steering wheel here and the other a large central monitor, which is now standardized at 10.25 inches in size. It's sited at the top of the center console, and it's big enough for rear seat folk to see. The gear selector and start-stop button share a stalk projecting from the steering column here, and you engage gears using its incorporated rotary controller. The central design element is this arc of trim extending from the air vents on the right hand side of the cockpit, which continues behind the steering column and then reaches its full height above the top lidded glove box. This surface can be specified in eucalyptus wood or, as here, in dark oak, and around it lie other renewable materials like naturally treated leather, wood and wool. The exact combination of finishes that you get depends on your selection between the 4 available cabin trimming packages, or interior worlds as the marketeers rather pretentiously call them. So beyond standard atelier, there's loft with synthetic leather, lodge with a wool leather mix, and this sweet trim which gives you real leather and that dark oak finishing. Everything centres around eco-minded sustainability, with 25% of the plastics that would normally be used in an interior of this sort replaced with recycled or renewable elements. The leather used is treated solely with natural substances. It's tanned using an olive leaf extract. We are less keen though on the material that's used on the instrument panel surround and the door trim panels, which apparently uses fibres from the canaf plant. Well, maybe so, but it still reminds us of loft insulation. Still, it would certainly impress your green-bearded friends. As for practicality, well, the glove box I mentioned isn't very deep and there's no overhead compartment for your sunglasses, but otherwise there's plenty of space for odds and ends. The door bins are amongst the biggest that we've ever seen. There's a recessed area beneath the central infotainment screen, and you get a deep bin between the seats with an incorporated cup holder, plus USB and 12-volt points. There's another single cup holder ahead of the rotary iDrive controller, plus you get an elasticated central strap beyond that, and there's a little phone compartment built into this ratcheting armrest. Finally, let's take a look in the boot, which has a rather restricted 260 litre capacity thanks to its high floor. Now, that's quite a bit less than every other rival in the segment can offer. The trunk of a Nissan Leaf, for example, is 176 litres bigger. At least it isn't affected in size if you order the optional range extender engine. 4 lashing eyes are provided, plus there are elasticated straps on both cargo sidewalls, plus there's a 12-volt socket on the right-hand side. There's no further space beneath the boot floor. As you can see, it's all battery under there. If you do need more room, the 50/50 split rib bench folds down using these handles, and they're easy to reach from outside the boot here. Activate those and you'll create a completely flat surface, freeing up 1100 litres. Like all electric cars, the asking price of this one would be a bit daunting if it weren't for the generous £4,500 grant that the government currently contributes towards purchase. For the standard model, that reduces BMW's initial asking figure of well over £33,000 to around £29,000. You can tack on another £3,150 to that if you want the range extender version, which seems quite a lot to integrate a scooter engine. The sportier i3S variant we're trying here costs from just over £36,000 before the grant reduces that to around £32,000. Again, the majority of buyers will want the range extender engine to be added, and that'll leave you needing to find around £35,000 for ownership. That's if you're buying outright, of course. Most likely i3 owners won't be. They'll be leasing, and that's the usual means of acquisition for all versions of this BMW. Now, it's the range extender version that we're trying here. That's the car that one motoring journalist dubbed the coward's choice. Well, paint me yellow if you like, but as someone who routinely pulls out his mobile to find the battery pancaked, I'm not sure I'd be altogether different charging a car. It's certainly true that if you really get your act together and you use the i3 as efficiently as possible, ownership of this version will see you paying for and lugging around a hunk of metalwork in the back that'll rarely, if ever, be used. But if I was buying this car, I personally wouldn't care very much about that. Peace of mind is hard to put a price on, and BMW's sales figures suggest that most customers agree, with well over 60% preferring the range extender option, which means that we're either a nation of cowards or something different. Pragmatists, I'd say. So, on to how the asking prices for all versions of this car stack up as value propositions in the growing electric vehicle market. Now, all the EV model prices and values that we're going to quote you assume subtraction of the government grant I mentioned earlier. So, in other words, they're based on what you'll actually pay. Now, BMW says that this is the best-selling electric car in the premium compact segment. Now, that doesn't mean very much because, well, for the time being anyway, there's very little premium brand competition in the compact part of the EV sector. The Mercedes B250e electric drive is a mid-sized MPV, which costs about the same as an i3, but sells in tiny numbers. And Jaguar has its I-Pace, but that's a much more powerful mid-sized SUV that costs nearly double what you'll pay for an i3. Otherwise, this BMW's direct EV rivals are models from the volume brands, and if you know this segment, there are four main contenders you'll probably have in mind. The market leader, Nissan's Leaf, plus the Renault Zoe, the Volkswagen e-Golf, and the Hyundai Ioniq Electric. As you'd expect, all those contenders look cheaper than this BMW at first glance, but to get the kind of equipment which is fitted to all versions of this i3, you'll need a really plush level of spec in each case. So, for example, with the Nissan Leaf, prices start at around £23,000, but the top spec Techno model of the prospective i3 customer will be more likely to be looking at costs around £29,000. It's a similar story with the Renault Zoe or the Hyundai Ioniq Electric, both of which are priced in £24,000 to £25,000 brackets in basic form, but which cost around £27,000 to £28,000 in top spec guise. We'd suggest, though, that a closer match to this BMW in terms of size and quality would be the Volkswagen e-Golf. That comes in a single quality spec and it costs from just over £28,000 after subtraction of the government grant. All of these rivals will offer you a little more all-electric driving range than an i3, but none of them can increase that with a sort of range extender engine type option that you can have here. As ever, it comes down to what you want. As an i3 owner, the range extender option gives you some of the driving range flexibility that you get with an alternative plug-in hybrid model. Now, if you are a typical buyer of this BMW, it could also be that you're considering a similarly sized car of that sort in this price bracket. Now, if you are, then do bear in mind that with plug-in hybrids, the government grant towards purchase falls to £2,500. And that does help to explain why the ultimate asking price for an i3 is actually no more than you'd pay for something like a Toyota Prius plug-in. As you might know, the market offers a range of different plug-in models when it comes to cars of this size, and nearly all of them are priced in the £25,000 to £30,000 bracket. In fact, BMW offers one, the 330e i Performance version of their 3 Series Saloon. That costs around £33,000 and it offers a lot more power than you get with an i3, but it's got an all-electric driving capability of only 21 miles. Now, that kind of range is pretty much par for the course when it comes to plug-in hybrid contenders of this size, which is why, if it's a full electric vehicle that you really want, the plug-in hybrid compromise might not really be what you're looking for. So let's finish our comparisons by pointing out that thanks to the government subsidy, we've now got to the point where full EV technology can be yours for pretty much the same money as you'll pay for a comparably sized family hatch model with conventional diesel power. Equip a mid-range BMW 120d Sport model with an auto gearbox, for example, and you'll be paying the same kind of money that the Munich maker is asking for the i3. A Volkswagen Golf GTD hatch with DSG auto transmission will also cost you a similar amount. And you don't need us to tell you that diesel family hatches like that represent another world in terms of the kind of cruder, smokier technology that they offer. So let's say that having considered all of this, you've concluded that there is nothing quite like an i3. Well, if so, you're going to want to know just how generous BMW has been with the standard specification. So let's take a look at that now. Now, full LED headlights have been added to the standard spec list this time around, and they join heat protective green tinted glazing, auto headlamps and wipers, park distance control, rear parking sensors, LED tail lamps, an alarm, power folding mirrors, and of course a standard charging cable. This one is 5 meters in length. Now, you also get 19-inch alloy wheels, although they come with a rather unappealing streamline star spoke design, which makes it look as though plastic covers have been added. So it's best to look at the optional rim designs that most buyers choose, and we'll come to those in a minute. Inside there's air conditioning that you can, if you wish, set with a timer to precondition the cabin prior to your departure. Plus you get cruise control with a speed limiter, heated front seats and a multifunction leather trimmed steering wheel. In addition, there's the drive performance control system, which via Eco Pro Plus and Comfort modes allows you to alter the throttle response, the steering feel and the gear change timings from the standard auto transmission, all of it better suiting the way that you want to drive. You'll want to know about infotainment too. Well, the key change with this revised model is that BMW has now improved its iDrive infotainment system and standardized the professional media package, which displays its set of its functions via a large 10.25-inch center dash screen. Previously, unless you paid extra for their professional system, you were stuck with a much smaller 6.5-inch monitor. The package includes navigation with a dynamic driving range map, Bluetooth with audio streaming and a 4-speaker DAB stereo. Plus, you get the full suite of BMW connected drive services, including teleservices and real-time traffic information, along with the brand's suite of online services that gives you access to things like news reports, weather forecasts, and a whole range of BMW apps. In addition, the system will even read out text messages to you. Talking of being connected, all i3 buyers will be offered use of a clever BMW Connected Plus app, and that can learn your mobility routines, read your calendar, and even prompt you when to leave for scheduled journeys. It'll get familiar with your most frequently travelled routes and memorise them as future destinations. It even has a share live trip status feature that allows the driver to share their current location and time of arrival with business partners, friends or family. Plus, the app can do all the things that these remote apps usually tend to do, so help you to find your car if you've forgotten where you parked it, and it can remotely lock or unlock the doors. All of that comes with standard trim. If though you'd prefer to upgrade yourself to the more dynamic looking i3S spec we're trying here, then your EV motoring will come with a little extra attitude. This S version is identifiable by larger 20-inch wheels, lowered sports suspension, bespoke bumpers and the extra high gloss black finishing that you'll find on the roof moulding, the A-pillars, the front kidney grille and on the wheel arch extensions required by this variant's wider track. Inside there's i3S specific steering and an extra sport mode for the drive performance control driving mode system. Whichever of the two main variants you choose, a key decision that you'll have to make before choosing the final spec for your i3 will lie in your selection between the various interior world options that the Munich maker offers for the inside of this car. What the brand calls its Atelier package comes as standard, and it includes andesite silver trimming and velour floor mats. Otherwise, you'll be selecting between 3 extra cost interior packages dubbed Loft, Lodge and Suite, and those aim to take the futuristic look of this BMW's cabin to the next level. Loft includes Sensitech synthetic leather upholstery along with extended interior lighting, and it claims to offer cool light colours, but in reality it's rather overly grey. The Lodge package is a little brighter. It trims the seats in a combination of wool and leather and includes a strip of eucalyptus fascia wood that some of our testers rather liked, but others thought reminiscent of a 1960s kitchen. This test car, however, features a top suite option, and that gives you Dalbergia brown leather surfaces for the seats, the centre console and the door armrests. Plus you get dark oak matte interior trim and a satin silver accent ring for the steering wheel. It is probably the spec to have if you can afford the extra £2,000 it adds to the asking price. Now, on to options. Before spending money on luxurious niceties, you're going to need to make sure that you're properly equipped for the charging regime, which is necessary to operate this car. Unlike some other brands, BMW makes you pay extra for the AC rapid charge cable that you'll need if you're fortunate enough to come upon one of the rapid charging points, which are springing up around the country. There are 2 cable choices on offer, and that depends on whether you think you'll be charging up from single phase or 3-phase power points. You'll also need to get a wall box installed in your garage for overnight charging if you haven't already got one. BMW offers 2 32 amp options, the Wallbox Plus or the more sophisticated Wallbox Connect. Now, with all that sorted, you can begin to peruse the lengthy extras list. The Park Assist package might appeal. This includes a reversing camera, all-round sensors and a Park Assist system, which will automatically steer you into spaces. And many buyers will want to tick the box for the i3 Plus package, and that gives you an upgraded Harman Kardon stereo, sun protection glass and the online entertainment package. Now that will give you direct access to millions of music tracks from either Deezer or Napster without the need for a mobile or MP3 device in the car. Now, as part of this, you can access your own music via cloud-based services. So, for example, you could create a playlist at home and have that available to stream to the car. The Plus package also includes a more stylish set of alloy wheels with smart turbine-style rims on the standard model and these jet black double-spoke style rims on the i3S variant. All of the items in the packages I just mentioned can be ordered separately if you wish. What else? Well, these days it is a bit unforgivable on a car of this price not to include some kind of smartphone mirroring setup as standard. That's unfortunately the case here. BMW requires extra cash from you if you're going to be able to use Apple CarPlay, and it fails to offer the Android Auto system at all. Still, at least if you opt for the Apple option, you'll find that quite unusually the connection works without any cables. You might also want a 3-year subscription to BMW's concierge service that at the press of a button will give you direct access to an operator, and they will be able to answer almost any question about your journey as you drive. Other options that we'd want to consider include a powered glass sunroof, comfort access keyless entry, BMW's optional TrackStar stolen vehicle tracking system, and the eDrive exterior sound feature, which will warn unwary pedestrians of your approach when you're driving in all-electric mode. You can also have the seatbelts finished in BMW iBlue. And if you choose not to have your i3 fitted with the range extender engine, you'll have the option to order an auxiliary cabin heating system. Do bear in mind that unless you order your i3 in Caparis White, that's the only standard colour, you'll have to pay BMW extra for your choice of paintwork. Now we've got the Melbourne Red here, which like the Imperial Blue and Protonic Blue finishes, comes with Frozen Grey contrasting highlights. The only other two options are Mineral Grey Metallic or a solid fluid black. And safety-wise, well, at the i3's original launch, BMW were a bit irritated when the Euro NCAP testers gave it a 4 rather than a 5-star rating. Apparently there were a few minor side impact protection issues. Now that rating wouldn't improve if that organisation were to test the car again today, because BMW doesn't include as standard the kind of autonomous braking system that Euro NCAP now prioritises. You do though get an emergency call button which connects you through to a helpful operator if you get into problems, and which will automatically call the emergency services if the airbags go off. As for more conventional safety kit, well, there's twin front, side and curtain airbags, ISOFIX child seat fastenings and tyre pressure monitoring. The ABS braking has fading compensation, plus dynamic brake control and brake standby, along with brake assist to help in emergency stops. That'll be aided in the wet by a brake drying function that keeps the discs free of moisture. There's also cornering brake control, hill start assist to stop you from drifting backwards on uphill junctions, and the usual dynamic stability control systems that you'd expect. There's also a special traction control system which is specifically designed for the extra torque generated by the EV powertrain. If you want more, you'll need to pay more for the Driving Assistant Plus pack. That gives you 6 extra camera-based safety features, forward collision warning and city collision mitigation, scan the road ahead as you drive for potential vehicle collision hazards. If one's detected, you'll be warned. If you don't respond or you aren't able to, the brakes will automatically be applied to decrease the severity of any resulting accident. That pack also includes a preventative pedestrian protection feature, and that warns you if someone's about to step off the pavement in front of you. And that's along with a speed limit display setup that pictures speed signs as you pass and displays them on the dash. Our favourite Driving Assistant Plus pack feature though is probably Traffic Jam Assist, and that's a setup that steers and moves the car automatically for you at up to 24 miles an hour in traffic. And finally, there's also an active cruise control with a stop and go system for the highway that can automatically slow the car to a stop and then, when appropriate, return it to cruising speed should you come across a motorway tailback. So the i3 is clever, high-tech and impressively light, the most affordable carbon fibre-rich vehicle on general release, all of which should certainly help in pursuit of the kind of super-efficient cost of ownership figures that made you want to consider one in the first place. Exactly what these will end up being will of course depend very much on how you plan to use the car. If you were to be running it for 3 years, covering typical city car mileages of about 7,500 miles every 12 months, you would in truth probably do better overall by choosing a cheap Super Mini with a 1 litre petrol engine. However, factor in something like the London congestion charge, which could set you back as much as £8,000 for that period, and then couple it with minimal running costs, and this BMW starts to look a whole lot more attractive. And that's especially when you consider the personal taxation advantages. There's no road fund licence fee to pay for a pure electric i3 variant. The range extender version, though, will be charged the same £140 road tax fee as every other sub £40,000 car on sale. Bear in mind that the i3S range extender model costs more than £40,000 to buy before the government grant's subtracted, and so that will be subject to a higher level of road tax. If you're a company car driver, then you'll know that benefit-in-kind taxation rates on green-minded vehicles are changing all the time at present, but of course you'll also know that BIK rates are guaranteed to be way lower than they would be for a conventional petrol or diesel model. Corporate business customers benefit from a 100% capital write-down allowance and very low levels of national insurance taxation, so it's nearly all good. That's assuming, of course, that you can afford this BMW's upfront asking price. It's certainly relatively easy to financially justify one in comparison to the kind of similarly sized diesel automatic BMW 1 Series, Mercedes A-Class or Audi A3 that will cost you much the same kind of money. As we've already suggested, much will depend on how long your commute is. BMW's used government statistics to calculate that the average drive to work is 13.1 miles in each direction, which, if it's true, is certainly well within the capability of the all-electric i3 variant. The officially quoted battery driving range for both the i3 and the i3S is between 118 and 124 miles, and that's calculated under the new WLTP combined cycle test, or worldwide harmonized light vehicle testing procedure, and that's supposed to produce more realistic real-world consumption figures for cars like this. Mind you, our experience with electric cars to date has taught us to deeply distrust official statistics, and sure enough, we've found throughout this test about 100 miles of battery range is more realistic. In real terms, that leaves the i3 around 20 miles short of a rival Renault Zoe and about 40 miles short of the market-leading Nissan Leaf, and that might be expected given that those two models have 40 kilowatt-hour battery packs, offering greater charge capacity than the 33 kilowatt-hour battery pack that's used in the i3. Whatever compact EV model you're looking at, though, the current reality is that a round trip of anywhere more than about 60 miles away from your starting point is going to be a bit touch and go unless you're able to put in a bit of meaningful charge to the battery before the homeward leg of your trip. Now, if just listening to that prompts you into an attack of so-called range anxiety, then your dealer will point you to consider one of the range extender i3 variants that BMW offers. This adds a little petrol-powered generator that cuts in to replenish the battery charge when it gets very low, and which operates with a tiny 9-litre fuel tank, and it offers you an extra driving range of about 80 miles. Now, that means that your total real-world range would be extended over that of the pure electric i3 to a figure that BMW estimates would be around about 205 miles. That depends on the season and conditions. Not that you want to use the generator in this car unless it was really necessary. Apart from anything else, it's not actually very economical for such a small 2-cylinder unit. It delivers about 40 miles per gallon in regular use. Whatever the case, whether the combustion power plant has kicked in or not, in driving this car you'll still always be pretty conscious of the limits governing exactly how far you can go before everything potentially grinds to a halt. Fortunately, that eventuality is quite unlikely thanks to the inclusion of one of the cleverer satellite navigation systems we've come across. It links into the BMW connected drive setup that's been specially developed for the brand's I models, and it includes what BMW calls a driving range assistant. Now this figures out whether your required destination is beyond the vehicle's range, and if it's way beyond the battery's capacity, then the nav system will direct you to a charging point. If though the mileage that you need to travel is merely a bit tight in comparison to the battery's remaining charge, then the navigation software will try to find you a more efficient alternative route. And at the same time, the system will suggest that you switch the car into its hyper-efficient Eco Pro or Eco Pro Plus modes. That's if you haven't done so already. You might want to think twice before going the whole hog and selecting Eco Pro Plus. That mode will limit your top speed to 50 miles an hour, and it'll reduce the output of the air conditioning. Now, assuming that you can continue towards your intended destination, further assistance will be provided by the system's dynamic range display. This takes into account the battery's charge status, the use of aircon, lights and wipers, your driving style and your chosen driving mode, and then factors in the hilliness of your chosen route, the likely traffic levels, and even the outside temperature. Now, once it's crunched all these numbers, it'll then show you what BMW calls a spidergram. That's a kind of bubble-like graphic on the nav screen, and that shows you exactly how far you'll be able to travel at any given time on your journey. It's uncannily accurate too. Plus, of course, there are lots of energy readout screens for you to keep an eye on. The one that you'll tend to use most is the instrument binnacle display, and that shows whether the system is charging or whether you're throttling forward using so-called e-power. Directly below that graphic are readouts which show your current battery-only driving range, and if you have the range extender model, the distance that you can travel further once the petrol generator cuts in. But that's just the start. An eDrive section of the iDrive center dash screen provides a graphical display of your recent frugality, and that's along with a real-time working diagram showing exactly what's being charged by what. And there's also a driving style analysis section which will grade you for anticipation and acceleration. Now, if your i3 has petrol assistance, you'll also get a range extender section, and that will allow you to hold state of charge and kick in the generator if you want to keep battery driving range for later in the journey. Enough on the driving range and the things that you can do to improve it. What about charging? Well, as we said, the iDrive screen sat-nav system will show you where the nearest charging points are, but unfortunately, what it doesn't show you is what type of charging the point in question provides. 3-pin domestic style, 7 kilowatt hour or 50 kilowatt hours. Fortunately, there are plenty of websites that will give you this information. zapmap.com and polarnetwork.com are the two most popular. You might also want to buy into the BMW Charge Now package, which for around £8 a month gives customers pay-as-you-go access to the largest nationwide network of public charging stations with a single card. Via the iDrive screen or by using a downloadable smartphone BMW Connect Plus app, you'll be able to continually monitor your car's state of charge. You'll be able to set charge times and preheat or pre-cool the cabin to the ideal temperature before setting off, so you won't have to drain the battery once you get underway with excessive use of the climate control. Of course, the most important charging you'll be doing will be overnight at home. As with any electric car, you'll need to install a 7 kilowatt Type 2 wall box in your garage for this. BMW offers two options here, the Wallbox Plus and the Wi-Fi enabled Wallbox Connect. Prices start from just under £600 including fitting. If you think that's a bit steep though, you'll want to know that other much cheaper 32 amp Wallbox solutions are available from other suppliers. Either way, an 80% Wallbox charge will take less than 4 hours, which, to give you some perspective, is around 3.5 hours less than would be required to fully charge a rival Nissan Leaf. Now, if you absolutely have to charge this car from an ordinary 10 amp household electricity socket, it'll take a yawning 11 hours. Either way, you can also set the car up on its integrated 7-day timer to charge itself on low-cost off-peak electricity tariffs. Get this right, and an overnight charge should cost you no more than a couple of pounds. If you're in a real hurry to replenish your battery on the i3 and you can find one of the few public fast charging points about that can deliver 50 kilowatts of high voltage direct current, then so much the better. Now you'll find them at most motorway service stations, where Ecotricity will typically charge you around £6 for a power top up, and also the vast majority of BMW dealers. An Ecotricity app will show you where these rapid charging stations are, and if you find one, you'll be able to use the AC quick charger cable that's supplied with the car, which you plug into the separate quick charge point, and that's provided just below the standard charging socket. Now, this will give the battery of the i3 an 80% top up in about 40 minutes. And now, if and when these rapid charging points are added in at garages and motorway service stations across the land, there'll be a rush for electric vehicles like this one. Any BMW dealer can handle servicing of this car, the need for which you can always check via the iDrive system. A BMW service inclusive fixed price servicing package is available on the i3 at point of purchase for less than £250, and that covers you for oil services, brake fluid top-ups and renewal of air filters and microfilters for a 3-year 36,000 mile period. There's also a 5-year 60,000 mile fixed price servicing deal available. Now we should also talk about depreciation. Now, residual values on all EVs tend to be disappointing, and despite its provision of a premium bonnet badge, the i3 so far hasn't managed to buck that trend. Experts predict that after 3 years of use, this car will be worth 30.9% of what you originally paid for it. What else? Well, there's the usual BMW 3-year unlimited mileage warranty, plus an 8-year 100,000 mile warranty for the lithium-ion battery pack. Rival Nissan and Renault models only offer you 5 years of battery cover. Owners will also get the benefit of BMW's iMobile Care scheme, which offers 24-hour roadside assistance. And let's also tell you that insurance is affordable, and that's thanks in part to the replaceable nature of the carbon fibre plastic panels. It's pitched at Group 21 for all models, and that's around about the same as an ordinary conventional BMW 1 Series hatch of similar size. And what about the green issues? Well, you can tell your green-bearded friends that nearly 100% of the vehicle weight is recyclable, and yes, that includes the battery pack. But the whole issue of eco-friendliness is, of course, a lot more complicated than that. Now, some in the green lobby get very angry about the whole pure electric car, zero emissions ethos. Now, they reckon that ignores the well-to-wheel demands of supplying the electricity that powers cars of this kind. Well, we would respond by pointing out to these people that they usually completely overlook the fact that CO2 figures for conventional cars also fail to take into account the logistical cost of getting fuel to the pump. Still, if you are one of those enviro-conscious folk, let's tell you that it's been calculated that the burden of filling your batteries on this car will result in a theoretical 40 to 50 grams per kilometre of CO2 being released into the atmosphere, and that's based on typical use of the UK's energy grid. That means that an i3 driver will still be having nearly half the environmental impact of a small petrol electric family hatch like Toyota's Prius. There's lots that we really like about the i3. It has a premium feel that's missing from every other compact EV you can currently buy, something we think would translate into a genuinely special ownership proposition. And despite the fact that it's been around since 2013, it's still the most distinctive and interestingly styled car in the class. Plus, it's also the most innovative under the skin. And better still, this BMW remains, by some distance, the most rewarding electric car you could choose to drive, especially in this uprated i3 guise. In short, if so far you've been a bit sceptical about electric vehicles, then you might enjoy trying this one. Even if it doesn't change your viewpoint, you're going to have a heck of a lot of fun proving yourself right. Compared to this i3, even a talented vehicle like BMW's own 1 Series seems a bit grey and two-dimensional. Like it or not, this is the future for small cars. Or at least it would be if the battery element of the i3's technology was able to match the sophistication shown elsewhere in the design of this product. To be fair, things do move quickly in this area. Being able to get just over 100 miles on a full charge wasn't a bad showing when the 94 amp hour version of this car was first introduced in 2016. Today, that does leave it 20 to 40 miles behind most direct competitors, but then none of these EVs will give you the option of a range extender engine that's able to add a further 90 miles to the battery-only range. Tick that box and you get yourself the only compact electric vehicle that's able to take you over 200 miles without stopping. It's just a pity there's a slug of fossil fuels necessary to do that. Are there other issues? Well, not too many, and they don't appear to bother most likely i3 buyers too much either. Rear seat space is quite restricted and you can only take a couple of backseat passengers. The boot is much smaller than you'll find in rival models, and pricing is of the premium variety. But if you can get over all of that, you'll find that this BMW has a lot to offer. The people who tend to buy it are mostly folk who otherwise wouldn't consider an electric car. People who would usually have stayed away from the electric vehicle revolution, but who are happy to join it when it's packaged up like this. Take a drive and you begin to understand why. The i3 is bold, it's futuristic, and in its own way, it's moved the game on in this sector. It's a car the segment needs. Try one and perhaps to your surprise, you might find that you do too.